You thought we were done. We got one more thing in store for you, and it's a little bit of a different thing. So if you are not familiar, in my work doing public scouting work, one thing I really learned what I wanted to do was really put my feet to the fire and really put my name behind the guys that I really liked in the draft. And the way that I do this is being a person born and raised in Toronto. You see the blue everywhere and blah, blah, blah. I figured that I would use Toronto Maple Leafs draft picks since 2015 to basically draft players that I want to put my name behind so that I can look back in the future and go, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's how things might go for me if I were an NHL guy. So before the draft this season, here is what the team looks like. They are a relatively small group of players, but the players in blue are also the ones that have played NHL games, and at the end of the day, that's the goal you're trying to find, is players to play NHL games, and I am always willing to bet on pace and competitiveness and skill regardless of the size of the player. It just so happens that a lot of the really good options later in the draft happen to be a little small. But I don't really seem to be that scared of that kind of thing, and that's generally where things have come out at the end of the day. So I thought it would be fun to do a quick little video outlining the 2024 class of players that I have added to Team Scouching this season. And we're going to start at 31st overall this year with Teddy Stiga. Now, everybody knows I love Teddy Stiga. He is extremely competitive. He's going to Boston College, and I expect him to be sick there. He's just so much fun to watch, really high level of skill, but the determination and confidence and just raw intensity that he has is undeniable, and I think that regardless of his size, he will overcome it. He's a player where I would be absolutely psyched to add him to my NHL roster, and the Nashville Predators getting him at the end of the second round I think could be one of the steals of the draft. I love Teddy Stiga, you know I love Teddy Stiga, and at 31st overall, as much as it pained me to say no to Alphonse Frey, I think Stiga just plays the style of play that I love to see so much, and we did get some decent offensive defensemen later in the draft, as you'll see. At 120th overall, we took Luke Misa, a player who I was frankly stunned was still available at that pick. I got a little bit of sweaty palms waiting for him to be available there. He's just a really fun, high-skilled player who has great pace in his game, really selfless playmaking ability, really good transition player, just doesn't bring a physical edge you kind of want out of guys, but for me, I mean, if you sit him down and go, look buddy, you're more than good enough to play in the NHL with a lot of skill and a lot of pace and a lot of speed and all of this stuff, but we need you to be more physical, otherwise it probably won't work. I mean, you just have to hope that he'll flip that switch and go, all right, I'll give that a try. And if he does and it works, you've got yourself a great pick. And at 120th overall, yeah, it was a bit of a no-brainer to me to just take a bet on the guy. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Luke Misa's potential at any of the forward positions, to be honest. At 151st, I took Timo Heenan from Jukurit in Finland, a teammate of Konsta Helenius, and I've been a huge fan of Heenan all season long. Not the biggest player, but I have just seen this guy compete and compete and compete in Finland this season. Guys can get on him and he just fends them off. He finds ways to battle through board pressure. He's just a relentless competitor, and I think he brings a lot of really good traits to the game that could be a bottom six NHL forward at some point in my view. His back half was a little bit more productive than his first half. I found his international games with the Finnish team at both the under 20 and under 19 level were really good. And he's a guy who I was kind of surprised wasn't drafted, but he's also 5'10", 5'11", so I'm also not surprised he didn't get drafted, but I'm a huge fan of Heenan, and at 151st overall, if we're talking about players who are long shots anyway, with the way that he competes and the way that he fends off pressure and the skill level and the quick shot that he has, I'm willing to bet on a guy like him. One pick later, we went with Denis Ustinov of Zurich in Switzerland, and I'm a huge fan of Denis Ustinov. He went undrafted as well this year. I'm honestly not sure why. He plays at the Swiss top division and played low-level minutes, but still played minutes in probably one of the toughest European leagues out there. I thought in his second division, he looked like a lot more of an interesting offensive defenseman than some people were portraying him to be. He had more freedom, a little bit more room to play with, and you saw more of his potential. His international games were not amazing, and I think that might be why people might have knocked him down the board a little bit. But for one of the youngest players in the draft who's already around 200 pounds and has decent size to his frame as well, I was surprised to see no one bother to take a chance on him, and if he plays a full season in the Swiss top division next year, I would not be surprised to see him as a re-entry, and I feel pretty good about drafting him. I've seen him a whole bunch this year, and I just really liked the way he plays the game and the way he approaches it. and the flashes of potential there that I think go a lot underreported, at least a lot more than it should. A few picks later at 157th, around here is kind of where I really wanted to take a goalie, but all the goalies I really wanted were already gone. But I took Kieran Walton, and Kieran Walton is a player that I'm not just drafting because people always yell at me about how small my team would be, and he's really big. It's because I really believe in him as a big player. He's got a lot of skill and a wicked shot. I think the upside with Kieran Walton is huge. I've really liked watching him all season long. He can be a frustrating player at times, but I get the feeling you give him a few years of development, I think he could turn into a really intriguing prospect at some point. I'd bring him along slowly and carefully, but when he's at his best, man, he is really talented, and I really feel good about drafting him in this range. To close out the draft in the 7th round, the Leafs had 3 7th-round picks, and with the first one, I would have used it on Thomas Geiss. I know, he's really small, and it's a meme at this point that, all the online scouts like this small defenseman who ended up undrafted. Very funny. The point is with Geiss is you're aiming for the moon. The guy is relentlessly skilled. He's super evasive on his feet, really creative, and compared to some of the other offensive defensemen in this year's draft who went as high as the 1st round, I look at Geiss and go, I mean, they all have problems defending here and there, but he plays professional hockey and does some of the stuff that these guys are doing at the junior level, but against grown men, and sometimes it works, and it's really fun to watch. I thought someone would take a flyer on him at some point, and I know some teams did have him on their list, they just didn't get to him. But man, I just really believe in Geiss, especially as a 7th-round draft pick, and again, similar to a guy like Yuri Tihacek, who also is a small defenseman, who frankly I liked more than Geiss, I think there could be a case to be made that he becomes a pretty productive player at the Czech Pro level, and maybe he's a re-entry guy next year or 2 or even 3 years from now, but I'm a real big believer in him, and as long as he's a 7th-round draft pick, I have no problem taking a flyer on him in that range. The penultimate pick for me was Daniel Neiman of Pelicans in Finland, and again, I'm really surprised this guy did not get picked. He's not a small defenseman, he's got a lot of pace in his game, he's very skilled, he's a very confident puck carrier with some decent passing ability as well, just brings a lot to the game that I really enjoyed. His under 20 level production you could look at and go, well, that's not very good, but when you scale it for even strength and the quality of the team around him, he was one of the better defenders in the Finnish Junior League this year, and I think that playing in Liga for the next few years could be really good for him. I'm very intrigued by him, and again, similar to Geiss and Ustinov especially, I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a guy that's maybe a re-entry candidate next year, especially after a good World Junior or something, because I really believe in the tools he brings, and I was honestly surprised that nobody bothered to take a swing on him either. And with the last pick of the draft, I would have gone with Ludvig Johnson of Zug in the Swiss Junior League this season. Now, I caught Johnson while watching Leon Mugli very early on in the year, and I went, who is that guy? He's a Swiss-Swedish defenseman who skates really well, is not the biggest guy in the world, but is not the smallest guy in the world, and plays with really good skill. This is a guy who I would be really positive with in his development, going, there's a lot of moments that are almost sick. It just didn't quite work out enough. The lateral quickness to get around pressure, just not quite there. The skill level to get through a layer of defensive pressure, just not there quite enough. The lateral mobility on defensive rushes to close out gaps and everything on his back foot, just not quite there. But when I watched him at the U18s this year for the 2 games he played, I tracked the game he played against the United States team, he looked pretty good. I was surprised he wasn't on the roster to start with, all things considered. He tracks play through the neutral zone if he's skating forward and trying to guide guys towards the boards extremely well. And I think there's just so much that Johnson brings to the table that at least when you look at the context of some of the other players that teams drafted this year, I mean, he's right there with them in a lot of ways. And I think that as an offensive defenseman, you give him a few years to develop and he takes steps up in Zug's system, yeah, I could see him being something in a little while. He's a bit of a ways away, and I could see it in a long time that he turns into something, but I can still see it in a long time. He's a really interesting player who brings a lot of upside, in my opinion. There's a really low floor there, but for the last pick in the draft, for a guy that every time I've seen gone, that was pretty cool, I'm happy to take that in that range. So all in all, I'm going to give myself a 1A. I knocked it out of the park this year. It was so great to be able to draft Teddy Stiga at the end of the 1st round, Luke Misa in the 4th round, and then go after guys like Heenan and Ustinov and Geiss and Neiman and Johnson, and I can just leave them in Europe and just go, you know what, I'm going to stay in touch with you guys and keep giving you guys pats on the back because taking steps in the positive direction, they should become really, really interesting players. Are they all going to make the NHL at some point? I can't say that, I don't know. But I do really like what all of these players bring to the table, and I would not be surprised if a number of these players who did go undrafted make a really good case for themselves to be re-entry players both this season, next year, and maybe even the year after. But at the end of the day, I'm really happy with how things have gone in general, and I really would have stood behind every single player on my list this year at these slots especially. And with that, now we are finally done. If you really liked the video, you can go to our description box and find our Fanatics affiliate link, where anything you buy in the store will give us a small kickback. Or you can go to scouching.ca, where a subscription will get you access to early access to content, exclusive blog content, as well as data tables for drafted and undrafted prospects around the world. So we're finally done for real with our 2024 NHL Draft coverage. Thank you so much for watching, whether you watched one stream or all of them or whatever. Thank you so much, and especially thank you to all of our subscribers, both at the partner and supporter level on Scouching.ca. Without you, my lights wouldn't be on right now. So thank you very much. We'll see you next season. We've got a lot of really exciting stuff planned for next year. Frankly, I have already started watching 2025 prospects, so maybe I have problems, but I guess they're good problems to have. So we'll see you then, and have a great summer.